It started with a doorbell chime that always seemed too cheerful for the gloom that followed. The thick glass door to Maple and Main swung open with a jingle, but the moment his shoes hit the tile floor, the entire cafe changed. Conversations dropped into whispers, laughter evaporated into silence, and every barista and server seemed to disappear behind the counter or retreat to the kitchen. The man, Leonard Rusk, strode in like he owned not just a place, but the town. Diamond cufflinks glinting under the mellow yellow lights, his custom navy suit stitched tighter than his morals, and that sharp, cutting expression of boredom he wore like a weapon. Leonard wasn't just rich. He was generational wealth rich, own the land under your feet rich. And he had no problem reminding everyone. The cafe staff knew the drill. Keep the espresso hot, the croissants perfect, and for God's sake, don't speak unless spoken to. His order was simple but unforgiving. Macchiato, 127 degrees. Oat milk, 2 pumps of vanilla. Not 1, not 3. One wrong move, and someone would be in tears by the end of the hour. He liked it that way. On that humid Tuesday morning, the cafe bustled with regulars, the mayor's assistant typing frantically into her laptop, an older couple sharing a cinnamon roll and crossword puzzle, a few construction workers on their second breakfast. No one dared to breathe wrong when Leonard's wingtips echoed down the aisle. But behind the counter, wiping down a tray with quiet confidence, stood someone unfamiliar. She was new, tall, poised, skin like polished mahogany and eyes sharp with a kind of strength that didn't come from books or college degrees. It came from surviving. Her name tag read Yura, and she hadn't yet been warned. She'd only been hired 3 days earlier, having walked in off the street with a quiet determination and a folder of experience from diners across 3 states. People are people, she had told the manager with a shrug. They all eat, and they all bleed. The manager liked her grit, hired her on the spot. He forgot to mention Leonard. The cafe fell into the usual stillness as Leonard approached the register. Yura looked up, offered a gentle smile. Good morning. What can I get started for you today? Her voice was smooth, unshaken, not a trace of fear. Leonard's eyes narrowed, amused. He wasn't used to being addressed so plainly, much less greeted with warmth. You must be new, he said, his voice low and biting. Let's see how long you last. Without waiting for a response, he rattled off his order with military precision. Macchiato, 127 degrees. Oat milk, 2 pumps vanilla. No foam. Served in a double-walled glass. And don't let it sit for more than 15 seconds. Yura nodded, not missing a beat. Got it. She turned, gloves on, and began preparing the drink herself. Other employees peeked out from the kitchen, wide-eyed. Was she really doing this without the shift lead? Leonard leaned on the counter, watching her every move. His smirk deepened as she steamed the milk. Most baristas around here get it wrong, he said. It's not an easy drink, I understand. You probably did your training at some truck stop in Mississippi. Yura didn't flinch. She poured the espresso, timed the milk to the second, and capped the drink with a quiet elegance. When she handed it to him, her eyes met his, calm and unwavering. Your drink, sir. Let me know if it's not perfect. I'll remake it myself. Leonard raised a glass to his lips like a critic at a wine tasting. He sipped, blinked, set the cup down. Hey, he muttered. Then, louder, it's not terrible. A gasp rippled silently through the back room. That was as close to a compliment as Leonard Rusk had ever given. But then the storm hit. Still, he added, you forgot to sanitize the lid before handing it to me. Basic hygiene. Disgusting, really. He pushed the drink back toward her. Start over. Yura paused. Her fingers gently slid the cup back to him. Actually, sir, she said, voice just above a whisper but carrying the weight of steel. I watched you lick your fingers before touching your phone. If you're concerned about hygiene, you might want to start there. The cafe went still. A fork clattered to the floor. Leonard's eyes flayed, his smirk dissolving into stunned silence. Excuse me, he said slowly, incredulously. Yura folded her arms. You heard me. The silence was suffocating. For the first time in years, Leonard was speechless. The manager burst out from the back, his face red, hands trembling. Yura, can I speak to you? Now. But she didn't move. Leonard recovered, standing upright, towering over her. "Do you know who I am?" he said. "I could have this place shut down. One call." Yora nodded, unbothered. "Go ahead. Call. But you might want to finish your coffee first. Won't be as good elsewhere." Leonard opened his mouth to deliver the tirade, the one he perfected over decades. But then, something strange happened. He looked around. Every eye was on him, but not with the usual fear. The construction workers had stood up. The old couple stared with quiet disapproval. Even the mayor's assistant stopped typing. The entire cafe had turned against him, and for once, he wasn't in control. That unsettled him more than Yora's calm defiance. He turned without a word, drink in hand, and stalked out, his footsteps less confident than before. The bell jingled as the door closed behind him, and the cafe exhaled. Yora returned to the counter, cleaned the machine like nothing had happened. Someone clapped. Then another. Within seconds, the cafe erupted in applause. The mayor's assistant stood and approached her. "That was incredible," she said, voice shaking with admiration. "Nobody ever stands up to him." Yora just smiled. "He's a man. Men bleed too." The manager pulled her aside later, worried. "You don't understand, Yora. That man owns half the block. He's dangerous." Yora met his eyes. "If standing my ground cost me this job, then it wasn't worth keeping." She toned, leaving the manager speechless, and went back to the espresso machine. But Leonard wasn't done. That night, as the sky bled into dusk, he made the call. Not to the health inspector or the city zoning board, though he could have. No, he called someone quieter, more dangerous. A fixer. He wasn't used to being embarrassed, especially not by someone he considered beneath him. "Find out everything," he hissed into the phone. "Where she's from, who she owes, and make her regret it." The line clicked dead. Leonard stood in the darkened study of his penthouse, the city lights cold and distant through the glass. He sipped his scotch and stared out over the skyline. He thought he'd ended it. He had no idea the war had just begun. The next morning, the rain came down like a warning. Sharp, relentless, soaking the streets in silver sheen. Yora stood at the bus stop with a hood drawn over her braids, her breath visible in the chilled August air, the kind of summer cold that made you question the sky's intentions. She had felt something shift in the cafe yesterday. It wasn't just the applause or the nods of respect from the patrons who'd once hidden behind coffee cups whenever Leonard walked in. It was something inside her, deep in the marrow, a long dormant fire reignited. For too many years, she'd learned to keep her head down. In diners where cooks threw plates when orders were wrong. In roadside cafes where customers thought a tip bought more than just service. In places where her name was mispronounced on purpose, where her skin seemed to set off alarms no one could explain. But yesterday, something cracked. She arrived to find the manager already waiting, wringing his hands. "Yora, I talked to corporate this morning," he began, and her jaw clenched. "Here it came. They said we're under review now." Leonard filed a formal complaint. "Accuse you of discrimination, unprofessionalism, even aggression. They want me to suspend you until further notice." Yora blinked, slow and steady. "So you're going to—" He hesitated. "I have to." "No," she said quietly. "You're choosing to." She handed him her apron without another word. Walked out. The rain followed her, a quiet witness to the injustice she'd long known too well. That men like Leonard didn't need truth. They had power, influence, money, and the system bent to them like iron in heat. She spent the day walking, past grocery stores with flickering signs, past schools with broken fences, through the neighborhood that whispered of better days. Her phone buzzed, first a message from a number she didn't recognize. "You don't know who you're messing with." Then another, "You should leave town before it gets worse." She stared at them, unmoved, then powered off the phone. This wasn't fear. This was clarity. 3 days passed. The cafe felt colder without her. Employees whispered about the fallout, but the customers asked constantly, "Where's the new girl? The tall one? The one who stood up to Rusk?" Even the mayor's assistant stopped coming in. The regulars noticed the emptiness in the air, the hush that returned every time Leonard entered. But something had changed in him too. He sat a little stiffer now, looked over his shoulder, checked his drink twice before sipping. The satisfaction was gone. He didn't know why, but her absence didn't bring victory. It brought rut. Across town, Yura found a small kitchen renting space by the hour. With what little she had saved, she bought ingredients, just enough to make 24 pastries, her own recipe. Sweet potato tart with ginger crust and honey glaze. She baked all night, the smell of spices and caramelization filling the space like a hymn. By morning, she had boxes labeled Yura's Soul Bites. She set up a table near the farmer's market and waited. It started slow, curious glances, polite smiles. Then one bite changed everything. Word spread. By noon, the table was empty. She returned the next day with more. Then someone offered to help design a logo. A local food blogger posted about her on TikTok. Within a week, she was getting inquiries from across the city. Orders doubled, tripled. People lined up in the rain for her tarts. Not just for the taste, but for her story. Someone leaked what had happened to the cafe. It went viral. Yura stood up trended for 24 hours. Activists reposted. Celebrities liked. Suddenly, Leonard's name didn't evoke intimidation. It evoked shame. He tried to sue, claim slander, libel. His lawyers sent letters. But the court of public opinion had already ruled. Photos of him berating staff leaked. Video footage, once buried, surfaced. And worst of all, his board of directors began asking questions. You become a liability, they told him. Clean up your image or step down. Leonard snarled, paced, broke a glass in his penthouse, but the tide wouldn't turn. Then one morning, he showed up at Yura's pop-up stand. The crowd hushed. Some held up phones, others stepped back. He stood before her table, dripping with entitlement. You think you won? He asked, voice low. You think this bakery, this flash-in-the-pan circus, changes anything? Yura looked at him the way a storm looks at a match. Calm, powerful, unshaken. I'm not trying to win, she said. I'm just trying to live. Something you clearly forgot how to do. He laughed bitterly. You humiliated me. No, she replied. You did that to yourself. I just stopped letting you get away with it. The crowd murmured. Leonard's jaw tightened. He turned and walked away. No one applauded this time. They just let him go. Weeks passed. Yura's stand became a storefront. Locals invested. A community college offered her a small business grant. She hired people who'd once been overlooked. Single mothers, returning citizens, the elderly. She made her bakery a haven. The wall behind the register held one frame quote, People are people. They all eat, and they all bleed. The city changed around her. Quietly, slowly, but it changed. Leonard vanished from the public eye. Rumors spread. Bankruptcy, scandal, a foreign exile. But no one missed him. No one searched. He became a ghost of arrogance past. One winter night, long after closing, Yura stood behind the counter, wiping flour from her apron. A young girl came in, no older than 16. Nervous, cold, hungry. I don't have money, she whispered, but someone told me you might still feed me. Yura smiled, pulled out a warm tart, wrapped it gently, and handed it to her. Eat, she said. Everyone deserves to be fed. The girl took a bite, and tears spilled down her cheeks. Outside, the snow began to fall, soft, silent, like forgiveness. And somewhere deep in the city, a man once untouchable stared at the reflection of who he used to be, and whispered to no one in particular, She didn't break me. She made me see. In the days that followed the snow's first kiss on the pavement, Yura's bakery became more than just a place to eat. It became a sanctuary. People brought their pain there. They brought their tired mornings and their late-night heartbreaks. They came not just for pastries, but for comfort, for healing, for a kind of quiet revolution they didn't know they needed. There was something sacred in the way she moved, gentle, deliberate, a presence that filled the room without ever demanding attention. Her smile wasn't flashy. It was real, rooted, like it came from generations of women who had learned to rise despite everything trying to press them down. And people felt that. They came in angry at the world and left a little softer. Her food didn't just fill stomachs. It restored dignity. But change, real change, never comes without resistance. It started small, city inspectors showing up unannounced, petty fine for non-standard signage or improper curb paint. A reporter who once championed a story suddenly published a cold, slanted piece questioning the legality of a rapid rise. Is the Soul Bites queen biting off more than she can chew? Read the headline. A week later, a permit for her second location was inexplicably denied. Doors that once opened with ease now seemed bolted from the inside. She knew it wasn't random. Power never loses gracefully. It claws, it punishes, it whispers into the ears of weak men. And Leonard Rusk, though hidden from the spotlight, still had allies, quiet ones in offices and backrooms, in policy meetings and dinner tables far from the public's gaze. Still, Yura didn't bend. She hosted community meals every Friday night, free for anyone who needed it. She gave a job to a young man recently released from juvenile detention and watched him transform from jittery and quiet to confident and proud. She partnered with local schools, teaching kids how to bake, how to budget, how to speak up. Flour is cheaper than shame, she told a classroom once. They laughed, but they never forgot. Her story kept echoing, picked up again by new voices. A podcast series dug into her past, unearthing details she had never shared herself. How she once worked double shifts at a gas station while taking care of her grandmother dying of cancer. How she once walked 5 miles to work when the bus routes changed without notice. How she'd lost a child. That last detail was spoken only in hushed tone. The host said it softly, gently, with respect. Yura didn't flinch when she heard it. She simply said, "Grief doesn't disappear. You just bake it into the crust." Across town, Leonard watched the resurgence from the shadows of a life he no longer controlled. His empire had shrunk. 2 of his businesses collapsed, investors pulled out, and the foundation of his power wobbled like a chair with one leg sawed off. His name no longer opened doors. It was met with caution, sometimes disgust. His calls went unanswered. His lawyers refused his rage. At night, he poured whiskey into cut crystal and stared out of windows that no longer gave him peace. He played and replayed footage of that moment at the cafe, the one where Yura had simply looked at him. Not with hate, not even defiance, just recognition. Like she'd seen his soul and wasn't impressed. It haunted him. In desperation, he decided on one final attempt to reclaim what he'd lost. Not wealth, not respect, but relevance. He contacted a television network. A prime-time interview. He would tell his side, spin the narrative, paint himself as misunderstood, framed, unfairly crucified in the court of social media. The producers, sensing a ratings hit, agreed. The announcement spread fast. Leonard Rusk breaks his silence. This Sunday at 9. The internet exploded. Some raged, others mocked, but everyone tuned in. Sunday came, and so did the cameras. Leonard sat in a studio of soft lights and carefully chosen decor, a humble background, a navy sweater over a collared shirt, aged but still powerful. The interviewer, sharp but polite, asked him to explain the accusations, the downfall, the infamous Café encounter. He leaned forward, eyes somber. "I was raised in a different time," he said. "I made mistakes. I was tough, yes, but never cruel. That woman, she humiliated me. She made me the villain of her story, and people believed it. But I've changed. I've learned." His voice cracked at all the right moments. A tear glistened. But for those who had truly seen his wrath, it rang false. Yura watched from her apartment above the bakery, sitting in silence, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of chamomile. She didn't flinch, didn't comment, just watched. And then, she turned off the television and went back downstairs to prep dough for the morning crowd. The next day, the bakery was busier than ever. Customers brought flowers. Strangers dropped off thank you notes. A group of young girls from the high school came in wearing handmade t-shirts that read, "We all bleed." Yura smiled, tears shining but never falling. She'd built something bigger than herself. Then came the letter. It was delivered by hand. A woman in a gray coat, no name given, just a soft nod. The envelope was thick, textured, sealed with gold wax. Inside, a formal invitation, an award ceremony, city leadership honors, recognizing individuals who inspire systemic change. Yora was selected as a keynote speaker. She read the letter twice, 3 times, then folded it quietly and set it on the counter. She didn't need validation, but she knew what this meant for others like her. A door had been cracked open. That night, she stood before a room of powerful people. Politicians, CEOs, community leaders. Cameras flashed, lights gleamed, and when she stepped up to the microphone, the room fell into reverent silence. She took a breath, then another. "I'm not here because I wanted to be," she began. "I'm here because I had to be. Because too many people have been silenced, stepped on, erased. Because we've been told to be quiet, to smile, to save. But I've learned that sometimes, to feed people right, you have to shake the table, break the plates, let the crumbs fall where they may." Applause erupted, but she wasn't finished. "This isn't my story alone. It's every person who's ever been told they were too loud, too black, too poor, too much. I'm not here to be palatable. I'm here to be real." Across the city, Leonard watched from his dim apartment. Alone, forgotten, he muted the screen. Back at the bakery, the next morning, Yora arrived before dawn. She rolled out dough with hands steady and strong. The radio played old jazz, soft and humming. Snow tapped gently against the windows. The bell above the door jingled. She turned, expecting a regular, but instead saw a young boy, thin, shivering, clutching a newspaper. He held it up. On the front page, a photo of her at the podium. Below it, the headline read, "The Waitress Who Changed Everything." He didn't speak, just held it out, eyes wide, like it was proof that hope still lived in the world. She smiled, walked over, and handed him a tart, still warm, wrapped in love.